all be happy inside. The second question is, how can Muslim communities exercise their religious freedoms in such a way that is also sensitive to the 9/11 attacks? So our objective is to provide a platform to meet both community members from different faiths and people that are involved in the actual mosque or Cordoba community center to come and to this Food Network sponsored event kicking off in New York City, but to create a understanding and break preconceptions between various cultures and faiths throughout this very diverse community. So our convener, who has so graciously offered to come and be our sponsor, is the Food Network. We just had to leave a voicemail, though they didn't confirm quite yet. And so the parties that we want to make sure that are included in this and that are coming to this event, and we're going to have sort of an invitation style, kind of like the earlier video that we saw with the tea for people in Sweden, Finland, Norway. Okay, one of okay, I was close, sorry. And so these, as you can see, and we've been talking about different parties we want to have a representative come and be a part of this sort of festivity. So the implementation is as follows. It's called, as she mentioned earlier, the Melting Potluck for 9/11, and it's going to be an annual cooking event in various major cities that have this issue of contention between, confusion between the Christian and Muslim communities and lack of understanding. So we wanted to have sorry? Yes, okay. Okay. So each city will have a mobile cooking school from the Food Network come and teaching diverse dishes and going to diverse dishes to the community, and they will in turn present at the show that all of these major parties are going to be at. And each day of the actual kickoff event is going to be an interfaith ceremony before the dinner, and then the show will be broadcasted on the Food Network nationwide. And that is what we have.
Constructive to prepare members of various civil society groups to have a platform where they can meet and construct a constructive relationship so that they could then come to a conclusion eventually. But we felt it was too early or too difficult to create a dialogue that would address the specific issues. So rather than going for a problem-solving approach, we thought we should...
And also, sorry for the presentation. So we identified the conflict as being, first of all, we focus on the sensitivity to the victim, those who experience were victimized by 9/11, and also freedom of practice of religion. And then when talking about how the conflict is manifesting, we think the Muslim community is feeling a sense of religious intolerance from the others. And also, whereas the 9/11 victim family feel disrespected, because building something like that to block away from where the atrocity happened would be, in the sense of translate in like they're not being respected, like those people they're lost. The Muslim community is not acknowledging that and respecting that right that they have. And the root causes of the conflict, we identify security, mainly relating to the war on terrorism, religious conflict and intolerance, ambiguity in the constitution about the use of historical spaces, especially relating to where the two towers, and also building, one of how that came out is the whole issue relating to building the mosque 2 blocks from ground zero. Okay, framing the conflict, who are the actor involved? We identified the family of the victims, the victim also, the family of the victim, but also those who were directly involved, those who were hurt but then got over it. The media, local politicians, but also politicians at the higher level. Yesterday the governor spoke and also the president. Christian entity, the U.S. Muslim Engagement Initiative. Framing the conflict, what we can do to change, to make an impact. We think we can do it through public education. I don't know if anyone wants to add to that. Okay? Public education in the sense that we bring people together, and we actually want it to be divided in two groups. Identify the Muslim community, influential people among the Muslim community, and talk to them, because maybe they might see this as being their right to be able to build a mosque, but at the same time, the Christian community or other religious community within the US also have the right. So we deal with the Muslim community, and also we try to talk to people who have been victimized by the 9/11 attack, and then we try to build a common ground between those two communities before we bring them together. And also family coming together, maybe through food or a teacup like in Norway, and also create an interfaith group. That is one of our main solutions. We create an interfaith group with the objective of protecting the right of freedom of religion, and that has been guaranteed in the Constitution. Some of the common ground we came up with is trauma, because many Americans still, although they were not directly involved in what happened or they lost someone, they saw it as an attack on all of them. Peace and security, because at the end it goes back to that, because I think if 9/11 didn't happen, there wouldn't be an issue about building the mosque a feet away from the World Trade Center. And also common faith, because they're all fighting, but at the end, whether you're Muslim or Christian, you all go back, you all believe in one God. Common nationality, from what we saw yesterday, all of them refer to being American. They don't refer to themselves as being Muslim or whatever, but they're still first and foremost American, and also American value. The convener, we identified Oprah. We think she will be a good platform to bring people together. And from our research, she didn't make any comment on it, so it would be good to have someone who can bring people from both communities together. And also, as a facilitator, we identified the Dalai Lama, because he's Buddhist, so he's not related to any of the two religions, although he came to our Muslim, but that is what we did. Thank you. I don't know if anyone would like to read it.
I'll probably come up with Q&A.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah, sorry we didn't follow the order.
That the idea is that this group can portray that the situation about the mosque has nothing to do with the terrorist attacks or Al-Qaeda itself, and that Muslim community in the US has nothing to do really with the Al-Qaeda, and so different, separate things.
And
good afternoon, everybody. My name is Will McAvoy from ACN. I'm reporting live from Battery Park in Lower Manhattan. This, of course, is the site of the festival convened by Mayor Bloomberg, which has brought together Imam Faisal, whose organization seeks to build a religious community center in Lower Manhattan. STOP, an organization who opposes this, along with everyday New Yorkers who have come together to participate in this festival. The center aims at providing a safe space for respectful discussion, and this celebration of togetherness, which has will be followed up with months of ongoing meetings between concerned parties to ensure that the trust developed here today is maintained in the future. The future of the center is now no longer a flashpoint for conflict, but rather a place for members of the community to come together for discussion.
Ready? Okay. So, we define the conflict at the macro level as a debate over religious freedoms, specifically related to Islamophobia. And our micro level is the idea of building a community center that has been represented as a mosque in a sensitive area. The conflict manifested itself in a debate in the media between conservative and liberal parties, as well as bloggers from STOP, the Islamization of America, that labeled this community center as a World Trade Center mosque, which then continued and spread across the United States. We defined the primary actors as Imam Faisal Abdul Rauf and the STOP Islamization of American bloggers. and the secondary actors as the family of the victims from 9/11, the Sharif al-Kamal, who is the developer and landowner of the space, as well as New Yorkers in general, Americans in general, and then media in the United States. This debate happened because, as previously mentioned, the sensitivity over the area of the World Trade Centers, as well as the stereotypes that pervade American culture about Muslims as terrorists and that they are responsible for 9/11. Again, also, the dissemination of inaccurate information as it related to the community center perpetuated this conflict. Common ground that we found was a sense of community as New Yorkers. We are all New Yorkers, we are all affected by this traumatic event, as well as the desire to preserve religious freedoms as a core American principle, and the preservation of the memory of 9/11 victims. So we decided that we were going to frame our discussion around the We Are All New Yorkers concept, as well as addressing the highly sensitive emotions that were a result of 9/11. And we wanted to promote the idea of religious tolerance. There were Muslims that were victims in 9/11 as well, so we were all impacted by this event. So what we decided we wanted to do is a series of activities. The first would be public service announcements, similar to what we saw yesterday in the media, so TV and radio ads, but faces of everyone, that we are New Yorkers, so Muslims, Christians, Jews, everybody. So they would all be represented, and then the key theme is we're all New Yorkers. Then we would proceed, we decided that Mayor Bloomberg would be a good person to kind of bring everyone together. He has gravitas, he has clout, in the community, and so he would be a good person to at least start that dialogue. Then we would move on to a potluck dinner for in the Interfaith Community Center, and to continue this conversation. And finally, we would hold a big festival. So the festival would incorporate booths from NYPD, handing out various trinkets to the kids. A photo booth that would have pictures of 9/11 victims, so everyone could, pay their respects. And then finally a concert, to kind of celebrate this idea of coming all together as one community. And then the final step would be a continued dialogue at the Interfaith Community Center, and they would make sure to meet monthly. It's open to the public, and they would just continue this dialogue of sensitivity and cultural. We're done, except there's supposed to be a song. It was going to be New York, but
Sing it.
yeah,
You can do it, come on.
You told me that. Not happening. Anyways, so.
In terms of the Islamophobia, because we analyzed one of the actors is the family of the victim, but then again when we saw actually the family of the victim also have dividing opinion on this, because there are a family of the victim that oppose this, but there are also family of the victim, even more than 50% of the family of the victims actually okay with this. That is why we think by engaging the family of victim that okay with this might be kind of inspired. And yeah, that is why we think the bigger problem rather than the family of the victim itself is how this idea being twisted in the media, which is the Islamophobia itself, rather than the family victim that demand over the oppose of the mosque.
First of all, we were trying to figure out what we want out of this. How do we know if we've succeeded or not? And the common ground that we identified is that we all want to feel safe. If you are Muslim, you're worried about harassment, you're worried about personal attacks. If you're on the other side of this issue, you are worried about your way of life as an American, you are worried about terrorist attacks, you are worried about feeling safe as a country which was never attacked before. But we've also got these other goals, which are maybe sort of longer-term objectives. That we obviously want to deal with the protests, and to have some sort of way to deal with each other when they have opposing views. And we're going to start local. Our framing is that it's a security issue. It's not security in the sense of militaries and politics necessarily, but security in the sense of feeling safe where you live, feeling safe to be who you are and express the unique elements of your culture. And I think everybody wants to respect September 11th. I think that was a deeply painful experience for everyone on all sides. If you were Muslim, now you have to deal with Islamophobia and the fallout. And on the other side of it, now you're worried about what that means for the country. So, we chose Bloomberg as a facilitator because we realize that he's come out on one side of the issue, but we're appealing to the identity of the people involved as New Yorkers. We're starting local. And, you know, if you're a New Yorker and the mayor of New York says, look, come talk to these people, we feel that's got weight. And then this other person, Dr. Gordon, who was suggested by one of our members, he does facilitation and in cases of trauma. He deals with people who've had serious emotional experiences, and he's sort of spiritual but not explicitly religious or of any particular denomination. So we wanted sort of a blank slate there that people could project onto.
Okay, so then laying the groundwork. First we'd send out invitations. So it would be to outspoken religious leaders on those who support the community center and those who oppose it. We'd also invite leaders of select supporting and opposition groups as well. And we'd make sure that we would mention all of our common interests, how 9/11 is a shared trauma throughout a variety of communities. It's a shared fear of a lack of security and that we all value community. And we'd also make sure to talk about facts rather than perceptions and stereotypes around the center. We'd also have open invitations. We'd ask specific leaders, but also have an application process for other organizations as well. Naming. We'd also make sure to name our retreat a certain way so that way it would resonate with both sides. And with the money, we'd have survey research to help us with marketing as well. Our facilitation tools. We'd do a 3-day retreat outside of New York City. We'd first talk about shared common experience, how September 11th changed your life, what makes you feel unsafe now, and what does a better future look like for everybody. We'd have trust-building exercises. We'd also work on dispelling perceptions and stereotypes. And then we'd have a conversation that would revolve around security and what it means to everybody individually. And then we'd also have role reversal for increased understanding. Our retreat goals. We want all of the community leaders to have a renunciation of violence from various groups. We'd also create a joint document that both sides can endorse publicly. We'd figure out how to talk to one another in the future. So if there's a conflict, how will you go about solving this together? And then we'd ask the groups to brainstorm. How do we increase the sense of security for our various communities? And what future events would you want to do? And then we have supporting implementation. We'd define and schedule future meetings. Leaders would return to their respective communities to hold town hall meetings. We'd have various media campaigns. And then the leaders would reach out to neighboring communities in New York in order to create a ripple effect of change. That's it. Any questions?
Great, thank you very much. Very well done. Okay, again, we'll just take 2 questions.
The first group suggested festival, culture and festival with food on the street, just to get to know the neighborhood and create a sense of community and sense of security. But it was just an idea, so we thought to give opportunity for the participants to create their own events, to come up with ideas of creating something together. So we didn't put this idea as a specific proposal because we wanted to be open for any proposal.
Okay.
And
Raj?
another thing
Yep.
was cooking workshop.
Well, I just wanted to say more that also we wanted to have a participatory process in which the actors themselves or stakeholders themselves decide what their needs are, because that at this stage it's maybe not very clear yet, and this is really a process through which they are going through. And then in the stage where the local community leaders go back to their community, we assist them with creating creative projects. And one of the things was a cultural festival that you already mentioned. So.
If I may, I found this to be kind of a difficult task in the time we had, but we took a good stab at it. So yeah, clarifying misconceptions and establishing common values at ground zero. So like some of the other groups, we wanted to start off by identifying how we'd like to frame the issue, and we sort of broke it up into 3 tranches. The first of which is to clarify the purpose of the actual proposal. Part 51 is not just a mosque, it is actually an interfaith center as well, and the main goal of promoting interfaith dialogue is important to fostering a sense of community, and is actually supportive of the kind of dialogue we want to start in this process. Also, an attempt to dispel common misconceptions that may have come out through the mainstream media, including the fact that a common respect for the tragedy of 9/11 is supported by the type of dialogue between the groups that would be invited to this facilitation. The third of which is just to articulate the risk of restricting the construction of the mosque. In terms of an American identity, the opponents of the mosque are basically fearful for the protection of the American identity, but nothing could be more inherent to the American political tradition than to protect the free exercise of religion and religious conscience. In fact, just to point to the First Amendment and say, well, in this instant, we have this much of the public who don't want this project to go forward, is just to acknowledge that at any point in the future, we can restrict the free exercise of religion based on public opinion. In terms of identifying stakeholders, obviously the imam proposing to construct the Interfaith Center. We also wanted to invite the families of the 9/11 Victims Steering Committee, the Center for American Islamic Relations, the local neighborhood council, and interfaith leaders that might generally represent their sects at the national level. I put 2 here just because I'm aware of them. Hamza Yusuf, who's an American convert to Islam and signed a declaration by Islamic scholars to Christian leaders preaching for understanding. He also was invited by former President George W. Bush to advise him on Islamic concerns, and he took a lot of flack for actually attending, but it showed great courage to go there and try to represent their concerns despite the backlash in the media. Also, Rick Warren, who's a leader of a large evangelical following in the United States, it's important to address these concerns, and he's also showed an inclination to a good faith dialogue with other sects. You can tell we didn't really have time to consider others, but I think we would ideally look for one good representative who would be cooperative in terms of this dialogue from all these other sects I listed here. In terms of convening the parties, I know Bloomberg has been quite popular. We mentioned him as well, but Bloomberg would be participating as a convener within the context of the larger National September 11th Memorial and Museum at the World Trade Center Foundation. It's important because you have a lot of local representation from New York City on that foundation, but in addition you have national political elites and basically important figures at that level, and you can tell that while the controversy is its nexus or center is at New York, it has been nationalized, so it's important to have some figures lending national legitimacy to this debate. For facilitators, I think this was a tough one for a lot of people, and including us. We came to an agreement on Georgetown University's Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs. Again, I think because Georgetown has established a good interfaith dialogue, and they also have looked at this question of policy decisions being influenced by misperceptions, and also because there is an international component to this, whether it's the fear over international funding or the influence that foreign actors may have on this mosque. While it may be outlandish, I think it's good to have this type of facilitator. And William Galston, again, it's the intersection of policy and religion. He crafted the Religious Freedom Restoration Act under the Clinton administration. Clearly that was before 9/11, and it just shows that we need to be protecting these same ideals even in the aftermath of a great tragedy. Okay, I had a picture there and it didn't go, but it was cool. For facilitation tools, we tried to settle on a location for where we have the dialogue, and we said the New York Botanical Garden, I believe. Okay, what does that mean?
1 minute.
1 minute? Okay. We think it symbolizes a safe space for dialogue. We also wanted to focus our project on the faith and fundamental core value of religious freedom like others and memorialize the communal harm caused by 9/11. The first exercise would be drafting personal values and the sharing of drafts with neighbors, purpose of which is to identify a nexus of motivation and personal experience. and create dialogue. The second would be to craft a personal narrative of how 9/11 affected you and basically, kind of ruined your innocence. Share a moment of silence to identify with others. The third exercise would be to describe an object that symbolizes your reflection on 9/11 and how it affected you personally. This is the last slide, and these were just some things we speculated on as means to support implementation in the aftermath, not just in the isolated event. It includes, media work. It also includes creating a safe environment at the garden, food trucks. I know other people worked on food as the center of their argument. Also just logistical considerations, making sure people got there on time, etc. And also establishing an annual conference and highlight video to basically reflect everything we talked about.
Thank you. You definitely win the award for the fastest speaker.
I think that in general it is not academic at all, especially if you look at the exercises that we're doing. It's really committing, getting the people involved with really basic exercises and make them think about the process that they're going through and challenge themselves and challenge their own values and their own stereotyping that they might have before they come there. So maybe it might be a good idea to put on that slide so you can just quickly get over the exercises. Because we did it really fast. But there are 3 basic exercises, and it's like the building trust, and we saw how important that was in the morning session.
Great, thank you. Raj? Feedback. Oh,
yeah.
Go.
And we also, I don't know if we got to that point, but the idea of this was so that they'd come to, if it went well, that they would come to a consensus where they would essentially draft some kind of form declaration, some sorts, that would be preferably at the front of, outside the mosque. That way the community would see it and it would be respected. And because we do, yes, because it's 100 more people doing it, but yeah.
Academic. What they're really doing is telling their stories and sharing a narrative about the whole event in order so they can both sides understand how they feel. And what's very important is that the other side understands the other so that the other is no longer the other, so to speak. Because they're sharing it and they can understand how the other person feels and how in the end they actually quite feel the same.
Great.
Okay, so we looked at the issue and we looked that obviously there was a small, is this on?
Yep.
Okay. There was a small conflict over the physical mosque, and that's where it exacerbated itself, but the root conflict was a perceived connection between 9/11 and the Islamic community, and residual tensions in the community's mentality regarding Islamic Americans and fellow Americans. And tied in with that was a lack of respect between those two communities. We're basing ourselves on search for common ground, Orbs. Through laying the groundwork, we're inviting the key actors to a facilitated dialogue in a designated safe space to co-design a cultural exchange event. We've identified some of those key actors, including the Imam and his communal religious leaders, families and friends of 9/11 victims, the American Center for Law and Justice, the Islamic Circle of North America, the Council on American and Islamic Relations.
And then because it's a funnel, you see that it's getting to smaller, less significant actors, so we decided just to continue on a presentation, although there's still some more there.
And that's right, and those actors will become clearer to us as we go along. So in our facilitation, and what we're doing with this facilitation is we're bringing people, so we're bringing those key actors into a dialogue in a room. It may be a one-day dialogue, it may be more than that. And we're going to be designing exercises that allow them to discuss the impact of 9/11 on their respective communities based on the idea that that's a shared experience. And we'll be playing role-playing games through which actors will experience alternative narratives to their situation. We're going to work with the key actors to formulate a unified platform based on the common ground that both parties recognise the trauma of the event in their respective collective communities. Once we've got that agreement, we're going to be working to design a cultural event. We had different ideas of what that might be. It might be a local festival, it might be a food event, it might be a competition, I guess, either through dance, singing, something like that, that could build to a national event, depending on how large they wanted to make it. And it may also involve creating a collective